Hello, hi, my name is Anne Wells. I'm going to talk to you today about studying politics at Bede. Can I just say first off, if you have questions for me, you can put them into the question and answer tab and then we'll come back to those at the end. So welcome. What I'm going to do is just talk briefly through why I think studying politics is a good subject to do. Talk briefly about the content of the course, certainly in year one. Mention the skills, the range of skills that you're going to develop absolutely when you study politics, and then finish obviously by taking any questions that you have. So look, why studying politics important? Well, for lots of reasons. I'm just going to pick out two, because politics affects every aspect of your life, right from the time that you're born all the way through. You think about every stage that you've gone through so far, going to school, clubs outside of school, everything that's affected your life, family, travel, it's all been about politics and political decisions made by those in power. So what better subject to study than to find out about why they make these decisions, how it affects you, got to be one of the most important things arguably that you can do. Because also linked to that is this idea about having a voice, having a democratic voice. We live in a liberal democracy, and a liberal democracy has lots of good things about it. It also has some challenges, and you have a right to a democratic voice. You, as a member, when you get to 18, you'll be able to vote. You have a say in how the country develops and the decisions that are made that affect your lives. Studying politics is going to give you a brilliant insight into why having a democratic voice is so important and should be treasured. Thirdly, it's a very well received subject. It's a facilitating subject. It's a subject that goes very well with lots of others on the curriculum, and it will develop brilliant skills for you, both for university and into employment and the workplace. Okay, so I'm going to start off by just trying to be give you a brief overview of what we do on the course. We cover UK politics and the political system, political ideas, and we also look at politics of the USA. And how it's broadly divided up is that we look at Britain and political ideas in year one, and we look at the USA in year two. So I'll talk a little bit more about the British material, only because that's what you will do first, but I will of course mention what's going on with the USA. So look, the course is divided up into two main parts when we look at Britain: political participation and the government, the role of the state and the government. So with political participation, we look at four key areas. We look at democracy and getting involved in politics and why people choose or choose not to get involved. And we look at formal things like voting system and whether the voting system in Britain is good, whether it needs to be changed, and particularly one of the debates that we look at is whether the voting age, which is currently 18, actually should go down. That's quite a big debate, been debated in Parliament over the last couple of years, whether that should change or not. We also look at the idea of pressure groups. I'm going to show you this picture, which you hopefully will be able to see. A big pressure protest group that was in and out of the news in the last 12 months, Extinction Rebellion, looking at ecological and environmental change. And they caused quite a lot of press, quite a lot of information. They were trying to press for government change. We look at whether pressure groups like Extinction Rebellion and others are good ways to enhance democracy and should be in our political system more, and potentially the downsides of pressure groups. So we weigh up whether they're good or bad for democracy. We look at political parties, the development of political parties. You will have heard of possibly the Conservatives, the Labour Party as the main two parties in our system, but we also now have others, SNP, Liberals, parties that have increasingly have a say in our political system. So we look at what they believe in, how they've developed, how they change, and that also links to political ideas at the end of the third year. Electoral systems. Now, we have a pretty complicated system in some ways of elections in the UK. Some people say our system, the general election system, is fair. Some people say it's very unfair. If I just share this with you, you will hopefully remember that in December 19 we had a general election, and in December 19 one party, the Conservatives, under the current system that we have, won 44% of the votes. Now, you could say that's relatively high. They won 44%, but 56% didn't vote Conservative. So if you look at those sort of statistics, you see that there are more people that didn't vote for that party than voted for them. But because of the system that we have, it's called something called first past the post, which we will look at. Because they got the biggest number in one party, they have over 2/3 of seats in Parliament. I'll talk about Parliament in a second. That means they completely dominate that. The Conservative Party currently completely dominates our political system. But 56% of people who voted did not vote for them. Now, is that an electoral system that's working for everyone? Is that democratic? Is it not? Okay, we will look at the different systems that exist and we will argue and weigh up. Now, we obviously at the minute, we personally can't change it because we're not political decision makers, but we can have a view and we can understand how this system works. We also look at voting behaviour and the media. The media, arguably a big debate on the media. Do they influence people's political views and how they get engaged in politics and whether they vote? Or do they shape people's political views? Okay, the media plays increasingly, and not just the traditional media, you know, the press, the TV, obviously social media. So we look at all forms of media and look at how they have changed over time, influenced people's involvement in politics. And we look at some case studies of elections. Okay, on to the second part, which is looking at government, the state. You have to, we learn about how the political system in the UK works, how it's governed. So we look at, for example, the Constitution. The Constitution of Britain is quite complex, but we will break it down and look at it in parts. And that's because the United Kingdom, Great Britain, is an old country. It's developed over many centuries. And so you will, I think, recognise this lady, Queen. She opens Parliament. She sits with a crown. She's sitting in the House of Lords there. She plays a prominent part in the state opening of Parliament, but she has now no real political power at all. Okay, and that's because we have moved from a monarchy to a political democracy. So we look at the change evolution in the Constitution. Now, alongside that, we look at what is arguably the most powerful authority in Britain, and that's Parliament. Okay, got a picture of the Houses of Parliament. Parliament essentially is the guardian of the people. It carries out the will of the people through the elections. It makes laws. There's a clear overlap when we look at Parliament with subjects like law. It also tries to control what the government does. The role of Parliament and its MPs is a really, really important one. And we look at what they do. We look at the powers of the House of Commons and the House of Lords. One of the other debates, you can notice I've said debate quite a lot. We try to argue and look at issues as much as we can. This is a picture of the empty House of Lords, very plush, very ornate. We say, should that still be there in 2020? Okay, is that now an institution that is out of date with a modern political system? And again, there's arguments for, there's arguments against. I want your view. I want you to research and find out, and we will have a discussion and a debate on that. Okay, last area really that goes with that is to look at the role of the government. Parliament looks after the will of the people and tries to control the laws that are passed, but they are acting and they are surveying the decisions made by the government. Okay, now the government is led by the Prime Minister, and here's our current Prime Minister, Mr. Johnson, and he's the decision maker, he and his cabinet. So we look at his powers, we look at his role, we look at how Prime Ministers' roles have changed over time. So we look at case studies of fairly recent Prime Ministers. We don't tend to go back into the beginning of the 20th century because that becomes sort of history rather than politics. We look at more contemporary political figures, and we look at how they governed, the style of government, things they got right, things they got wrong, what it tells us about the power of the executive compared to the power of Parliament. And then the last area is, alongside that, is the judges. Look at the role of the judges. Now, judges aren't political figures, they interpret the law, but they have a really important place in our political system. So again, you've got some overlap here with subjects like law. And the decisions that judges make can affect what politicians do. And judges can ask politicians sometimes to go back and relook at a law that's passed in Parliament. So there's quite a debate to be had about what they do and their relationship with the political system. Okay, that briefly covers what we do. Obviously, I'm looking at very much the headlines. There's all the areas that go alongside those topics. That covers what we do in UK politics. On to year 2, we will do political ideas. So when we've looked at parties, where does the idea of liberalism, you may have heard of, socialism, okay, for any of you that have done, you know, maybe Russia or the Cold War in history, you will know the ideas of a conflict between a communist state and a democratic capitalist state. So look at what are the origins of socialism, what are the origins of conservatism. Okay, is the conservatism that Boris Johnson is carrying, is following through, is that different from the conservatism of someone, say, like Margaret Thatcher? Okay, on to year 2, very briefly, America. We look at politics of the USA, and what we do, it's a comparison exercise. We look at very similar topic headings to Britain, so I'm not going to go back over those, but just to say we look at how the American system as a twin, if you like, democratic system to Britain. We look at how the American system works and how it's similar and how it's different to the UK. So obviously we'll look at things like the way that their parliament, it's called Congress, is set up and how it's structured and how it's similar and different, and how the powers of the congressmen and the senators, how they are different perhaps to our MPs. We will definitely be looking at this man, and I'm sure that you know who he is, currently the 45th US president. He is facing an election in November, and I would say to you, even though we won't be studying US politics in detail until year 2, keep an eye on what's going on in America with their political system, because obviously, you know, he's trying to deal with all the usual events, and he's trying to deal with, isn't he, the pandemic, and look at how he is going to fare in this election. Is he going to be re-elected? Okay, he's quite a controversial figure, so he would be an interesting figure to study. Is he going to be re-elected, or actually is his opponent, Joe Biden, going to beat him in the presidential polls? And that's coming up in November. So we look at all aspects of America, the presidency, and then I'll just mention this one to you, or show you this picture of the key legal house that the Supreme Court in America is based. And the reason why I show you this is that we have a Supreme Court in Britain, which has a fair amount of power, but its power is limited and much less than the Supreme Court in America. The Supreme Court is a very powerful branch of the American system, and that's one of the key differences. And we look at the clash really between Supreme Court judgments, civil rights in America, and also what the president and his government want to try and do. Okay, so that is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of some of the content of the course. How are you going to learn? Well, you're going to learn lots of different ways. Okay, you're going to get lots of variety if you study politics in terms of how you learn. By gathering knowledge, by researching, by discussing, by debating, by analysing material. The way that you're assessed is going to be by source questions and essay analysis. The exam is, the course, is 100% exam based, so there is no coursework for politics. So you will spend your time developing those skills, gathering that knowledge, analysing, assessing, perfecting your written and verbal communication skills, and then you will sit exams at the end of the first year, and then 2 exams at the end of the first year, and then 3 exams at the end of the second year. You will be, by studying politics, you'll become a confident communicator, a confident person to argue and debate. And I don't by that mean just sort of being debate as in shouting, but debating as in being able to argue your question, your point of view, being able to listen to others, offering counter arguments, being able to assess information and weigh up what's a strong piece of evidence and what's a weaker piece of evidence. So analytical debating and discussion skills are some of the key skills that are going to be in the forefront of politics. We will endeavour to get out where we can. Obviously at the minute we are, because of the situation that the country's in, we can't go on visits, for example, to political buildings, but as soon as that rule changes, and hopefully that will, we'll be able to organise a trip, and my plan would be for us to go down to Westminster and Parliament and view the House of Commons, the House of Lords, and have a specialist tour. Okay, I think I've covered all the major things that I want to say to you, and I'm just going to check now if there's any questions. Okay, great. Okay, so have a really good rest of the summer. Think about politics, listen out to what's going on, particularly with regard to America, but also, of course, what the government and Parliament is looking at the moment in terms of the decisions that they're making, dealing with the COVID crisis, and think, look at what they're doing and think, are they serving the people? Are they making the best decisions? How is it impacting on people? You start to sort of think like that, and you are beginning to think like a political student. Okay, have a good summer, and bye for now.